I can't help but think of so my buddy Andrew Rappaport is a pre-supper, and he argues this line that I don't think is very good, that there is no such thing as an atheist, because atheists would have to know that there are no gods, and of course you would have to have infinite knowledge to, you'd have to know every little area of the universe to say that there are no gods, or some crazy shit like that.
He's definitionally wrong, so we're starting bad.
Oh yeah, and I tell him, he's like, well, that's what it originally meant, and I'm like, yeah, well, meaning of words come within contexts and how they're used within those contexts, and the context has changed, and so has its use, and so that definition doesn't really work because I don't apply it to me, and that doesn't mean that I'm not the thing that I self-label, etc. Anyway, he's a buddy of mine, and we have this discussion pretty often.
I would just tell them, okay, then I will change the term.
Well, no, but I'm trying to link it to why maybe I have a knee-jerk reaction against arguments for atheism, because that's kind of what gets conjured for me. Like, arguments for atheism would be like, okay, well, evidence that there is no God. Well, is that the goal, or is it that this belief that I do have, or these beliefs that I'm reserving judgment about, or reserving my claims to knowledge about, or reserving belief in, these are the reasons for them? And I guess that's...
Wait, can you step back through that last couple of sentences?
Yeah, I tried to articulate it when it was just you and I don't know how good of a job I did. But for me, it's the difference between arguing that something exists or doesn't exist objectively, as compared to subjectively articulating the reasons why I have a belief, or I withhold belief, or withhold judgment about a certain position.
If it's a little bit like I hear people sometimes say, I'm not making a positive claim.
See, I embrace that it's a positive claim. I embrace that atheism is a positive claim.
Okay, yeah. So I do think there can be arguments for atheism against certain manifestations, and I think even when you talk about, and we talked about this a little bit last week, when you talk about God, there are some properties we're talking about that we mean by, usually it's a person, or it's something that has thought, something with a creative quality, right? So there's usually when if you're talking about, say, pantheism or something like that, you're not referring to God. You're referring to more of a thing.
Well, that's why I gave the definition for the supernature that I gave. A brain independent. A brain-independent mind that is intent-driven.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is that you don't have to prove it, right? Number one. So that's not the bar that we have for proof is not the bar. It just has to be reasonable, more reasonable than it's not, than the inverse. And not in terms of not only is Andrew Rappaport flawed in the definition for atheism, but also in terms of what the bar is, right? In terms of proof. So I don't have to prove to you that there's no God. I just have to find that it's more likely than not that there is no God, and I hold that belief. That's a belief that I hold. I hold that for many different manifestations, and I hold that for the generic deity, the bare minimum, I believe is not the case. And I have that's probably my most, that's the loosest or the lightest, I like to term it on my map of reality, that's the lightest pencil mark, because I'm prepared to erase it. But it is what I think is the case, right? And so I think when you have reasons for what you think are the case, and somebody asks you about it, you should be able to offer it.
Yes, and we're in agreement on that. Ozzy, you wanted to mention something about the Andrew Rappaport thing I brought up?
Yeah, that's what I joined, actually. I was watching, and then I heard you talking about Andrew Rappaport and his definition of atheism, and why he thinks a person can't be an atheist. And this is an oft-repeated argument that you hear from some religious quarters, that, and some agnostics actually make this mistake of defining atheism as the view that one can only be an atheist, you only qualify as an atheist if you can establish or demonstrate or prove that there is no God. That is, you have to rule out the very logical possibility of the existence of God. And of course, that's an absurdly high condition, and that's why they'll say, well, if you can't, sniff out every corner of the cosmos and all of reality, and show that God's not there, and God's not there, and He's not here, unless you can do that, you have no business calling yourself an atheist. And thus, atheism is always rational. But one could try to argue that if they want to. That's okay. I mean, you can just grant them that if you wanted to. But it wouldn't follow that there's no such thing as atheism. If atheism is the belief, not the warranted belief, just the belief that there's no God, and if anybody in the world is of the opinion that there's no God, then whether their belief is warranted or not, they're still an atheist, right? So Rappaport's definition here, or argument, doesn't imply that there are no atheists. At best, it implies, even if you grant the definition, it implies that there are no warranted atheists, because as he sees it, in order to be an atheist, you'd have to preclude the logical possibility of a God. You'd have to demonstrate that it's impossible for there to be a God. And that challenge can't be met, he thinks, and therefore atheists couldn't be warranted in their atheism. But that doesn't establish that there are no atheists. So that argument is actually a stupidity, right? I mean, that is actually a dumb argument. What you're saying is that you are only an atheist if you're a warranted atheist, and you can prove there's no God. Imagine if you said so-and-so out there is not a theist because he can't prove that there's a God. There's nothing like a mathematical proof that there's a God or something like that, right? Now, there's some theists who think that they can prove a God, okay? But imagine if some perfectly devout person who believes very sincerely that there is a God and thinks that there are good reasons, but doesn't believe that they can prove that there is a God. And there are many such religious people. Would you go around saying that, no, they're not theists? They're not theists because, by their own lights, they can't prove that there's a God. And it's ridiculous. It's just a terrible argument. So that I find kind of a very fatuous argument, and I'm always puzzled when people who've been in the great debate, as long as Andrew Rappaport has been, would make an argument like that. I understand when people new to the discourse join, and they have these rather narrow definitions, make that mistake. But he's been in this discourse literally for years doing this, arguing with atheists and about atheism. That, I think, seems to me like a kind of rhetorical trick. I'm going to define atheism such that you're only an atheist if you're warranted in your atheism, and then I'm going to insist that you can't be warranted, and that therefore there can't be any atheists. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean,
it's more of a point-scoring kind of move, because like when he pulls it on me, and like I said, he and I do get along, so we're able to kind of laugh about, the exchange that we have, and I'm just like, dude, you can call me whatever you want, just so long as we have a discussion about what I do and don't, believe, what is or is not my position. If you want to call it George, fine. My position is George, but like the whole I'm not an atheist and there are no atheists things, that has nothing to do with you and I having a discussion about what your position is and what my position is on the matters at hand.
Yeah, can I make a clarification, or not a clarification, but in addition to it, and this Holy Spackle just mentioned it, is that often Calvinists or precepts will point to the verse in Romans regarding the suppression of knowledge, and I think part of that is that alleviates the argument of because beliefs are caused. It to some degree, I see that alleviating them the argument of if God is going to that God would need to present himself to me in order for me to believe. If you're suppressing the knowledge, that puts it in your court, so that you know that God believes. You're just hiding the fact that that you know it, or you're suppressing that fact.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't bother me too much when a Calvinist or someone of that persuasion says there are no atheists, because, just as a matter of doctrine, I believe that there are no atheists, that everyone in their heart of hearts believes that there's a God. I mean, okay, we can argue about the veracity of that, but when people hold that, I wish that they wouldn't try to confect essentially a bullshit argument like the one that Christopher was repeating, not as his own, but as one that he's heard. I mean, it's perfectly okay for a Calvinist to say, as a matter of faith and doctrine and revealed knowledge, I believe that there are no atheists. But to confect an argument that defines atheism as only the warranted belief that one can prove that there is no God. It's just ridiculous. First of all, that's not. I mean, good luck trying to find atheists who actually think that. I mean, it's vanishingly rare atheists who think that they can absolutely prove that there's no God.
And I have to admit that might be a bias of mine, and I'm glad that you brought this back up, because that is how just when I hear the phrase "argument for atheism," I immediately go to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned
people
that.
That define it so thinly, so flimsily, that or however you want to look at it, so strongly.
No, it's tight. Yeah, it's so tight.
That the benchmark is so high to meet. Like, for some reason, that's what I hear. So that might be my bias. Maybe I'm not against arguments for atheism. I'm against the connotation of what that means to me. I don't know.